Postage supplies, our share of a comp study that the city had done, and then some taxes in there. So if there's any discussion around that, kick that off. Otherwise, I'll take a motion to move that along.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next thing up is an update from Joe on our BR&E program. Joe?
This past month, we had the opportunity to visit with 3 businesses in Prague, tech support in their new facility, and then New Prague Floral yesterday, and last week we visited Sue's Cool Shop. So a great opportunity to learn about some of the industry trends that is affecting them as businesses and businesses. We have a couple more planned for the end of this month.
All right.
Nice.
Any discussion coming out of those at all to touch on? No.
I don't think so.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Strategic planning update, Josh and Ken.
Yeah, I included in your packet, and we'd kind of talked about this I think it was a couple meetings ago now. We kind of got this kicked off, and Keith Dahl with Ellers is back here, and I'll kind of kick it off to him if he wants to step up to the podium, but just kind of start talking through some potential goals before we then go back to the city council for a joint meeting.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. You guys seen it up front there?
Yep.
So back in May, my colleague Jason and I were here, presented data to you folks to overview and level set this economic development strategic planning exercise. And so with that, we formulated some goals based on our discussion, based on the comments and answers that you provided throughout that meeting. And just to go over high level as far as the goals formation, this all started back in May. Now we're presenting you with the ideas that we have for the goals, and we can walk through those individually. And I can give you some color and context about what we were thinking as far as strategies for those goals. And we can formulate the strategies after this meeting so that once we go to the council for a joint session to make sure we also have their buy-in as well as your buy-in, we can start drafting the plan from there, formulating the action items that are going to help influence implementation of this plan, provide with short-term, mid-term, and long-range action items for you to start implementing within the community. If you want to go to the proposed goal slide. So we did come up with 5, and like I said, we can walk through these individually and take your comments if you have any. We'll refine the goals as needed based on your feedback. So just starting, we looked at strengthening New Prague's industrial and commercial tax base. Unlike what you've done in the past with buying land and putting in the infrastructure, streets and utilities to sell land to industrial commercial entities, we don't necessarily think over the next 5 to 10 years you necessarily have to go out and buy land. That doesn't mean you're not being proactive about industrial and commercial investment within the community. You're just essentially shifting to become a partner of the development, formulating those public-private partnerships so that if a company comes in and does identify a piece of property that they want to develop on, that you could look to facilitate and help with some of those street connections, utility extensions, upgrading the utilities if the water or electricity doesn't necessarily meet the demand that they need to operate. As far as what public assistance or a public-private partnership could look like, it could be the establishment of an economic development TIF district to help incentivize them where the city, the EDA is not providing necessarily upfront funds. You're helping them on a reimbursement basis over time, effectively a rebate on their property taxes, have you. So that's our idea with strengthening the industrial and commercial tax base. In addition, it's also focusing on the commercial storefronts within the downtown, making sure that those have reinvestment happening formulate some strategies around that.
You want us to interrupt as you present?
Please do so, yeah.
So I think the big statement that you made has been something that we've been wrestling with for a long time here. And you seem to come to the conclusion already that we don't need to buy something in the next 5 to 10 years. So can you just walk through how you came up with that conclusion?
Great question. Yeah. So when it comes to cities, when it comes to EDAs for economic development, we have limited resources. We need to be strategic about where we put our time and energy and resources to incentivize and encourage economic development. So with that, and with the discussion that we had at the last meeting that we were at back in May, in the formulation of some of the other goals, we felt that prioritizing some of the other goals in the funds that the EDA has available makes more sense to put the time and energy and resources towards those and be an active development partner with industrial and commercial development, but not going out necessarily and buying land. That would be a sizable upfront capital investment, and it would tie your resources for probably the next 5 to 10 years and might make it harder to accomplish some of these other goals. And so that's where we came to the decision where you don't necessarily have to be proactive and go out and buy land. You've done that over the last 10 years and you've been successful with it. But now shifting the idea a little bit and trying to hone in on some other areas of economic development.
The wording on number one, I'm not sure. Sometimes we get caught up in, what's the goal and what's the strategy and what's the differences, some of that, but the semantics of it. But when we talk about strengthen, I always think about it as growing it, and strengthening is also a part of that to be able to have the foundation to grow off of. But in the past, we've kind of had this goal of trying to increase the percentage of commercial and industrial as a percentage of the tax base, and it's been a very difficult thing to try to do, but at least it's something we can measure to see if there's any traction that we've gotten off of it. So should this number one be a little more expansive or include the word grow in there somehow, or try to elaborate on what we're trying to achieve there? Or?
Yeah, we can change the wording around if that's something that the EDA wishes to do. Strengthen and grow, I mean, you're ultimately trying to go in a positive direction at the end of the day. And maybe that will come a little bit clearer and more transparent once we have specific strategies formulated. Trying to keep the goals a little bit more high level, expansive. And I don't necessarily want to make the goal unreachable. I want to keep it within reach, but the strategies and action items will definitely influence how you arrive and how you achieve that goal.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the first one? Okay. Moving along to the second one, another big thing that came out of the discussion was redevelopment opportunity and reinvestment within properties within the downtown, the west end of town, to have it match the overall aesthetics of the community. Specifically identifying the old flour mill in the city center. So looking at possibility for other resources available to help with redevelopment, reinvestment within these areas, doing some planning studies. I know you've done some planning studies with a few of these, but how do you leverage what you've currently done to date? How do you market that to developers? Having conversations with real estate agents, brokers, possible developers to try and generate some interest with redevelopment and reinvestment within these specific areas. So that's another goal that came out of that discussion. The third one will probably help when I give a little bit more context, but it's establish New Prague's competitive edge. And what I mean by that is New Prague has a great logo, you've got a great brand, tagline, but how do you market yourselves for economic development? When we look at the city's website specifically for economic development, it's very limited with the amount of information that's out there. So essentially doing a branding effort, doing a marketing campaign to show the demographics of the area, to show that yes, you are 45 minutes from the Twin Cities, but how is that a strength? How is that a positive? You're in between two major freeways, but how do you overcome the negative connotation around that where somebody would just have to go a little bit further out of their way? So trying to make it more appealing from a marketing standpoint, making sure you're putting your best foot forward with your website. Doesn't have to be a separate website that you're doing for economic development. It could be more pages within the city's website and have like a specific top navigation tab for economic development so that you can share this information about demographics, about why you have a competitive edge and why somebody would want to relocate to New Prague. So that's more of what we're saying as far as establishing New Prague's competitive edge, making sure that other people are aware of that. The fourth one, and I know this came in right at the tail end of our discussion back in May, but promote a full range of housing diversity. What we heard consistently from you folks is that businesses are having a tough time hiring people, but the people that they hire are having a tough time finding a place to live within New Prague because lots are very rare and scarce. So how, as the EDA, how can we promote housing development to make sure that the workforce within New Prague has a place to live? So that's maybe, partnering with the council in concert with them on looking, all right, well, are there any areas that are ripe for development that we can annex into the community for a residential subdivision? Are there any dilapidated homes, dilapidated properties that the EDA or city could pursue to acquire to try and incentivize some type of residential development? Maybe it's single family homes, maybe it has a little bit more density as far as townhomes or duplexes. I know another big thing that has been coming up as of late is garden style apartments where it's not a massive complex with massive density. It's essentially 2 levels and you have more of a community vibe around it. You've got amenities with usually an off-site facility that might have a fitness room, a pool, stuff like that. So how can we look at other residential types to add a little bit more density, especially with the cost of construction where it's at, land prices with where it's at, to help bring that down, to make it more, achievable, reachable for somebody who's working within New Prague to live within New Prague. So that's what we're going after there with promoting the full range of diversity. But it could also be a conversation. I know the city has an EDA and an HRA, and they're 2 separate entities currently. But several communities, commingle those 2 commissions together, those 2 authorities together. Is it worth it to have a conversation to say, do we want to give the EDA Housing and Redevelopment Authority powers? Is that a something that we want to look into to give you more latitude when it comes to incentivizing housing development instead of being focused solely on economic development? So that's another conversation that can come out of this. And then the 5th and final goal, secure resources for economic development. This can be internal, but this can also be external. When it comes to establishing, say, a economic development tax increment financing district, if you end up having resources or increment that's not necessarily needed for the development that's being constructed, you're able to capitalize that tax increment, essentially use it as a revolving loan fund for future development, for future business development. So it's being able to leverage and capitalize a fund so that you can start growing a revolving loan fund internally. But this is also looking externally with other state agencies, what grant programs are out there, what loan programs are out there. Are you leveraging new market tax credits with businesses that are in this area? Historic tax credits, stuff like that, so that you can generate the equity needed to incentivize these projects to go forward, commercial and industrial. So with that, that's essentially some of our ideas as far as strategies to come up with and give more color and context around the goals that are in front of you here this morning. So curious if you have any additional thoughts as far as the goals. Are there goals that you want to revise, amend? Are there goals that you don't necessarily support and you would like us to remove from bringing them forward to a conversation with the council at a joint meeting between the two bodies?
I think it rounds it out pretty good. I think it's a good menu for us to discuss and choose from, not a set in stone plan of we must do something with every one of these, but I think it rounds out a lot of our discussions over many years here.
Hey, Nick, can you point your mic so we can pick you up?
You actually want to hear what I say? Okay, all right. Wow, this means a lot to me.
The thing I kind of see missing is kind of, I know you said you don't have to buy land, but it's still kind of lacking future growth minding. It's kind of more focused on existing, so I'm thinking more east side, Alton Avenue, when that gets developed. You know, I'm thinking we want to be involved in how that, you know, comp plan stuff and putting input on there. So maybe some more expansion related items.
That would be more involvement with the county as they progress with their
Yeah,
plan.
yeah, yep.
I know that's actively been worked on, but
Yep. Yeah.
I guess I would like more feedback on the housing one, because that's a new one for us, and in a previous meeting, we didn't necessarily, I didn't get the vibe that we all necessarily agreed that was maybe a function for the EDA to do, but I think when you put on your goals, I think that means it's supposed to mean something, and that means you're actually putting money into some of these things, and I guess I'd like a better understanding, are we really on board with that? That idea of actually being actively involved, and that means our people are gonna be working on more than just the Minnesota Housing Mortgage Program.
So I question mark about that too, because we've always discussed it, and certainly of late, as a lot of us have been here on the EDA for a long time, we've seen the lots go from in the hundreds down to slim pickings in town, and it is an issue for businesses. Now, whether that's our purview to do something about it, I think is a big question mark. I know that our charter and our focus has always been on existing and future businesses. That would be a little bit of it's an interesting discussion, but I think our focus has always been on the business end of it.
I do think that that's a good direction to head, because I think if you look at our efforts in the industrial park with actual ownership of lots and the development that's happened in the community at the same time, I think it's tough to unpair those. I think if you look at the growth that we've had in the industrial and the commercial base, it's reflected also growth in our housing stock and population in the community. Most of those businesses, outside of bricks, I guess, when you look at the industrial park, most of those were members of the community where they grew out of facilities or needed additional or new facilities. And I think realistically, that's where most of our growth in that industrial and commercial base is more than likely to come from. People in town who've started something on their property, in their garage, on a shed outside of town, and now have grown to the point where they actually need a true commercial space. I think the more growth in the overall population that you have in that, the more of those stories you're gonna see. I would assume you guys are probably thinking that just the overall economic conditions where we're at right now point to probably just market forces taking care of some of the things we had undertaken previously, and, you know, using our dollars for a little more strategically, I guess.
Yeah, I threw the comment of housing out there just because I feel it's a need, whether or not it lands at this entity or this amount of the city to work with, is certainly up for discussion. I just know, to Nick's point, you know, where we started at a number of years ago to where we're at now in terms of availability in general is just almost non-existent. So I just threw it out as a need and a discussion point more so than anything.
It is something that keeps coming up on our BR&E visits. It seems to be hard to uncouple the two at this point in time. Now, whether that changes in the future, it's to be seen. But in terms of what does that look like? we're down to the final couple of lots. We have less than 10, I think, available, so how we can, assist with that, I think is an open discussion. I don't know fully without annexation or something like that.
Yeah, and maybe how the goal is worded right now, it's a little too premature. Maybe some evaluation needs to happen first to say, okay, is this something the EDA wants to focus its time and energy on?
Yeah.
And we can make those revisions.
Yep.
It doesn't necessarily commit you to doing something to housing, but you can definitely evaluate, is this something we should pursue further as a body?
I would think that through this process, then we could hopefully refine a little more detailed of what that means to us and what our involvement should be, because if you look at the past, most of the incentivizing and housing areas, typically in multifamily, we've all heard about abatements recently, and that's one of the incentives that's used to try to encourage that. I think, had tax increment, and we see these things, and they're typically, I mean, residential zoning and industrial commercial, we've never really had to step in that part of the zoning area. So this would be kind of a big change for us. So if we're just putting in our goal that we're gonna be supportive, or are we expecting that every time we get an abatement request, the EDA is gonna be involved in advising on it? Do we want to be involved in that? So for me, I'd like to have a better understanding of what does that mean? What our future meetings gonna look like then if we're gonna get involved in some of those kind of things? Because every multifamily housing, it usually has a request for incentives. So it's kind of an area that this body's not really been involved in that I'm familiar with. But it's a very good discussion.
Okay, well, thank you for the feedback on that. As far as next steps, we'll take your comments here, your feedback, we'll refine the goals, and we'll coordinate a joint meeting with the EDA and the city council in the near future, whether that's this month or whether that's gonna spill over into next month. We'll work with staff to determine when that is. We'll also, after that joint meeting, with the strategies, with the goals that we talk about, we'll start drafting that strategic plan, we'll start drafting the action items, and then eventually bring that back to this body to review. And from there, once we get your approval and staff's approval that everything makes sense within the strategic plan, we can do a final presentation to the EDA and the city council. So as far as next steps, we're probably still taking a look at about a month, 2-month process. So with that, thank you for your time. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Brent, actually, Bruce, I'll hang out for a second. So one part of this, and this is kind of like a half-part update, and I'll do the rest of the update now, or later. Part of anything, or not anything, but a lot of things that the city or the EDA will want to do kind of later, especially related to this and other items, is that we will need to formally create an economic development district. I know, speaking to both the city attorney as well as members from Ellers, some cities do that on a piece-by-piece basis. Many cities, because the EDA deals with the entirety of the city, many times we'll just name the entire city an economic development district, so that way it's able to kind of look more holistically at the city. So part of that whole process does require a public hearing, and so assuming that the EDA is all right with it, I can get queued up a public hearing for the meeting in August. That'll kind of help get that ball rolling, so that way whatever comes out of this strategic plan, we are able to fully kind of realize that without having to then go backwards a couple steps.
Sure.
And I say that's a half update because I've got another update coming later in the meeting. But
Okay.
as long as there's no opposition to kind of getting that process kickstarted for that economic development district, I'll get that queued up for next month.
Any comments?
Works for me.
All right,
Okay.
thanks, Josh.
Yep.
From there, we can move on to business updates for the month. Ken?
Yeah, just a few updates for you. We did not have any new single-family home permits issued in July, as I think Austin pointed out. We're basically under 10 that are on the market at any given point to purchase. So we have had discussions kind of in the background from some developers, but nothing submitted yet for either concept plan or preliminary plat. But we're hopeful that we get something moving forward on the single family front, we'll say before year end. We did have work begin on Great River Energy out in the industrial park at 906 6th Street Northwest. It's a 20,000 square foot addition out there. Also in that area, Bevcom, if you've been out there, has walls up on the building that they purchased from the industrial park. So that project's been going well. As has been in the news and we've talked about before, the police station addition, footings are underway at the addition to the building at 505 5th Avenue Northwest. At the city council meeting on Monday night, we did have Heartland Credit Union approved for a variance for basically a drive-through to have a microphone and speaker in the front yard along Trunk Highway 19 or Main Street, and they plan to break ground on August 1st for their new building. That will open up the end cap and drive-through for another business to move in to the New Prague Commons Strip Mall. The POPS facility, they did award the contract for the work to Eddie Shimoda with Shimoda Project Management to be the general on the POPS project. They plan to start construction by August 15th, and we did receive the final plans for that and are reviewing them currently. And then just a couple of final smaller projects, but just as newsworthy because they take care of some vacant properties. Case Aesthetics is moving into a location at 314 East Main Street that had been vacant for a few months. And that is not a major project, but notable again that it's taking up a vacant rental space. And then finally Corner Bar, that's been closed for a number of months. They're making great progress in the building. And while we don't have an opening date established yet, they did apply for the liquor license and are moving ever closer to finally opening. And part of their project as well is putting an ADA accessible bathroom in that space as well. So looking forward to having that back up and open in the downtown area. That's all I have for the month.
Is there any talk of what might go into the credit union space at the end of the strip mall?
We have not had any discussions with any potential tenant at this point, so I don't have any information.
The credit union, like a 9-month bill job, or how long of a?
Roughly 9 to 11 months, right in there.
Okay, so.
All right, thank you, Ken. CDA updates, Joe, back to you.
Cold, so I'll speak here. A couple of updates. The deadline for the Fast Track Challenge is July 31st, so if you know of any entrepreneurs or first stage businesses that are looking at applying, New Prague has had great success in the past. Please encourage their applications, and that event will be held on October 9th, and thank you to Midwest for a very generous donation to the event this year, along with New Prague Chamber of Commerce as well. And then coming up on September 18th, we will have a broker event at Canterbury Downs. We're hoping to have about 100 people present for that. So if you are looking at promoting sites in the community that you would like to develop or have public-private partnership, Ken will be one of the presenters at that. We're having each of the cities talk about what you have to offer and projects that you'd like to promote. So it's a great opportunity to get in front of metro area real estate developers as well as realtors. And then we will be opening our new facility August 13th, the CDA, so we'll be sending something out for an open house for you to come visit us at our new location. And then finally, looking at your goals with housing, just a reminder that the CDA can certainly support and be a partner in any housing developments. Our focus has not been traditionally on new lot development, but it's been on affordable housing. We do have some local affordable housing aid dollars that we are administering on behalf of the county. I think 2025, there's $4 or $5 million. We're not sure with the federal budget, how much we'll be able to do in new programming versus supplement things that might be cut. but we do have those dollars and resources available for new affordable housing projects around the county. So as you develop your goals, just a reminder that we're a partner here, willing to assist and support your efforts. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Tony, updates from school district.
Yeah, so I was not here last month, so I apologize for that. Other than that, really, to be quite honest with you, no new updates. The school does not shut down. As most people know, there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. Got all of our teaching staff hired. Continue to look for employment in support staff areas, bus drivers, paraprofessionals, cooks, all those types of things, which is a need. I love the strategic plan. I love the direction that you folks are taking and support housing. As always, we deal with kids and education, and love to have as many kids as possible. So the doors are open. It's been a great summer. We're working hard to make sure the school year is off to a great start, and continue to update you. Come back in the future months.
Tony, I think we got an email about another one of the businesses coming into the school. You guys are already planning that again?
We're gonna have the second annual Career and Tech Fair.
Awesome.
You were our guest speaker last year, and that is coming in October. We're doing it early October, which was phenomenal. We had over 35 businesses, and definitely have more than that. And that will be for our sophomore and juniors.
Is that a change? I was thinking younger kids
It was
last year.
8th grade and
Okay.
10th grade. We received feedback from a variety of people to make a little bit of a change to 10th and 11th grade.
Okay.
That will be very well received.
Kudos to you guys for doing that. That's no small undertaking.
Part of it.
All right. Tony, Josh, the director's report.
Yeah, the one big talking point coming out of this is that on Monday evening, the city council directed myself and staff to look into the kind of two primary funding options for the police station. One, the CIP bond that they were pursuing. A petition was successfully submitted to send that to reverse referendum vote in November, should they want to continue down that path. And so they've asked myself and staff to kind of explore what that ultimately could cost and what that would look like as timeline and all that other stuff. The other option they want us to explore is a potential EDA lease revenue option, where the EDA would ultimately issue the bonds and then be an owner of the building and lease it back to the city through the entirety of the bond, and then transfer ownership back over to the city afterwards. And so the reason why I mentioned in the strategic planning portion the EDA district is that to be able to do that option, the building would have to be placed within an EDA district. And so while not the primary driver of the EDA district, it would be one of the components should the city council ultimately decide to go that way. So there isn't a whole lot for you all to do at this point. I suppose if you have questions, I can certainly try to answer them, but it is something that I guess Ken and I and staff are really weighing out the options, trying to get timelines together so the city council has some information here at the next meeting as to if it wants to try to choose a more specific route at that point, or keep just kind of seeing where the cards lie out there. I know hearing from the city council, I won't say consensus, but the general feeling from the council seemed to be that they're looking for the route that seems to be most advantageous to taxpayers, knowing that the EDA route generally does cost a little bit more. You can't get bonds at quite as good of a rate, but that there are also other options to be weighed in terms of when would funds need to be had in hand and other items. So yeah, I can certainly stand for any questions you may have at this point, but as of today, there's really no action that needs to be taken by the EDA.
I guess my only question would be like, at some point, there will be you gotta make a decision point, this debarkation point. Roughly, We talking 2 months? We talking 3 months?
So,
I know when Rebecca, obviously with Ellers, was saying at the city council meeting that, looking at like November for bond sales type stuff, but
yeah, so, generally, if, the city council ultimately decides to go through the CIP route and send the question to voters, the city attorney at the city council meeting, he thought that they would have to make that decision within the next 30 days or so. He is doing a deep dive on that when I talked to him yesterday, just to make sure, because really that deadline is set by when a question needs to be submitted to the county to be able to get it on the ballot. And so there's kind of that mini, we'll say mini deadline as to, is this something we're gonna wanna send, or is this something we're gonna wanna move over to the EDA at that point? Now, there is always the option that if for some reason it makes it through the whole process, and the referendum gets voted down, the city council does still have a building to fund, and they could always pick up the EDA lease revenue at that point. That'll be kind of one of the options to be weighed. Is it, do you go through the process and see how that plays out? Do you make the move sooner? I mean, the big unknown for everybody at this point is where the bond market is at. I mean, just speaking to Ellers over the last 2 months, the bond market has risen significantly. The initial bond sale happened at around 4.4%, and at that time, Ellers was estimating that had we gone the EDA lease route at that exact moment, it would have been about 1/10% higher, around 4.5, 4.6% for an EDA lease. The rates that she quoted on Monday evening at the council meeting were up to about 5.08 or just about 5.1, and so rates have risen significantly. I don't have exact numbers on what that means in terms of per home cost, but even speaking to her yesterday, she goes, that's the big unknown. They could hold, they could go down, they could go up. So that's always kind of the big unknown factor out there. And really, like I said, even if the council had decided on Monday night, let's go the EDA lease route, we would still have to get this economic development district in place before that could happen. There would also need to be a small change to the enabling resolution for the EDA. That would have to happen at the city council level. And so both of those things would need to take place, and so we wouldn't really be able to move on the process until August anyway at this point. And so we're just kind of trying to get all that stuff worked in the background, knowing that it needs to happen anyway with the strategic plan, so that we're just prepared in case the city council decides to ultimately choose that route. But yeah, I think once the sale happens, generally, from what I understand, usually you can have money in hand in about 30 days after that.
Perspective question, option 2, the EDA lease route, is that a unique thing in this town and in other towns, or is it not a unique thing in this town and other towns?
So I don't believe this town has ever gone an EDA lease revenue bond. It would be new for New Prague. That being said, it is not an uncommon used by other cities. I know even talking to our city attorney, other cities that he works with have used it. Some cities, that's just kind of their preferred route. They know that it does cost them a little bit more, but they just prefer to work through that route, and they're kind of used to the process. But it is worked in the statute as one of the, probably I'll say 2 or 3 primary ways that public infrastructure is funded, especially buildings and whatnot. And so it's not uncommon to be used, being that it is slightly more expensive. I think cities prefer to go the other route if at all possible, but there are some cities, speaking to our city attorney, that almost exclusively use the EDA route.
Because it feels like in the past, I'm just trying to find perspective on this, but we've been the catalyzer, the pass-through entity for other sort of things like this. So it doesn't feel that unique, but good perspective.
I know for a fact that the city of Montgomery did use that vehicle for their police station.
Oh,
did they?
Yes.
nice.
When I went over there to see the facility with their maintenance, he did mention they did use the EDA lease
Revenue.
I mentioned this before, but I just mention it again. So the community center was, instead of the city owning it, the EDA owned it. instead of the city or the EDA turning it over to the city and borrow the money for the community center, the EDA borrowed the money, went to, and that was unique in the sense there was two local banks that did the financing for that community center. The EDA borrowed the money from the banks. The city would have more difficulty borrowing it from the local banks for that at the time, and the EDA was the agent that did the Mighty Ducks grant also. So there's a complicated deal, but it's not like a leaseback thing, but it was some of the same dynamics and challenges were involved in it. So there was a good example of something that the EDA owned it, and later on, then the city took possession of it, refinanced it under city bonds, and went through it. Then I don't know all the details, but the fire department, that whole piece of land there was owned by the EDA. And the EDA was the original entity that was really in charge of that and responsible for the redevelopment of it as part of the industrial park. When the decision to do the fire department occurred, that all got transferred to the city. The city decided they wanted, or we wanted as a city, to own that property and put a fire station on it. So that got transferred back over from the EDA into the city. So the dynamic between the city and the EDA is pretty common. Everything's in the normal course of business. EDA gets its authority through the state, but also through the city. So there's a natural relationship there.
Right, any further discussion? If not, we can move along. Any miscellaneous items? All right. If not, then we have a closed session to move into.
And
So we're just gonna adjourn this meeting and then we'll just open up and.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And I need to recuse myself
For the next meeting,
for the
yes.
next one.
I'll second the motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Do I need to formally state that, just so it makes it onto the?
Nope, you just need to not be in the
You'll
meeting.
just be on the roll.
Get outta here.
call.
Absence will speak loudly.
Yeah.